This is Eric Rutan of Cannibal Corpse. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast with Andrew McKay Smith.
G'day everybody, thanks so much for joining me, I appreciate it. This episode features a conversation with Blood Incantation's mastermind, Morris Kolontyrsky. The catalyst for the chat was the release of The Hidden History of the Human Race. It came out at the end of 2019. And this chat actually took place in April or thereabouts of 2020, so just as the pandemic was kicking into full gear. It has been available, the conversation has been available via podcast apps ever since then, and I'm repurposing it here for you, the YouTube audience, because God knows there are 100 times more of you here than there are over at the podcast apps. So here it is, just for you. Now, throughout this conversation, we talk all about the Blood Incantation philosophy. We go into influences. It's definitely a conversation. So I know some of you have a bit of a dig at me and say, hey, you talk too much. Well, fuck off. I like talking to these musicians. They're some of my favourite people in the world. I did catch up very, very briefly with Morris when the group toured Australia in, I think it was October of last year, so 2022. They put on a pretty good show, although they didn't play for long enough, but, you know, I say that about all my favourite bands, that they should play for a bit longer, but it was great to see Morris in full flight because he's an exceptional musician. Something else, only 12 months ago or thereabouts, he released a solo album by any other name. It was under the Blood Incantation moniker, but a synth masterpiece is Time Wave Zero. Check that one out if you like your synth wave or your synth drone, because Morris knows how to write extreme metal as well as some of that stuff. So here he is, Morris from Blood Incantation. Enjoy. Morris, I've got to tell you, it's a real thrill to talk to you. I've been listening to your music now for a couple of months, almost non-stop, in between all the other stuff that I get. And look, I was drawn to reach out to you for a conversation because in the scheme of things, look, I'm a metal lifer. I've been into this for almost 30 years at this point, but I haven't quite heard anything like your music, I must say. And I'm not just giving you a compliment for no reason here.
I appreciate it.
Look, I found Hidden History of the Human Race on New Year's Day. I remember it well. I remember that exact moment because you were appearing on so many year-end lists. You didn't appear on mine because, to be honest, I just hadn't heard of you. And I hadn't... Yeah. I sort of had some awareness, but I wasn't aware of how great you were. It's probably the best way to describe it. But I thought, I better check this out. And, of course, I found you on Apple Music. And holy shit, the next few hours were spent diving into your music, and it's fair to say I've become a pretty strong fan, a firm fan of your work. And one of the key things that I love about it, outstanding musicianship, truly world-class musicianship, but I also understand that you're recorded using analog equipment, which gives your music amazing warmth without sacrificing any of the clarity that is essential for understanding what you guys are doing. And look, the capstone to my comments here, I feel as though Blood Incantation are worthy of joining the hallowed hall of greats. Now, I'm talking Death, Cynic, Morbid Angel, Atheist, Pestilence.
Man, it gives me goosebumps, thank you.
Yeah, well, look, this is genuine feedback and true praise, I've got to say, because Blood Incantation is certainly a band for fans of those great bands that will never go away. You know Absolutely. What I'm saying? The Death and I feel like Chuck's music is finding just new generation of fans constantly, and I feel your music is going to do something similar. But look, now that I've said all of that, and look, I only feel like with you guys, I'm reading positive music, positive feedback and comments online about what you guys are doing, and that the metal world has truly opened their arms to you guys. And look, do you feel as though that within the band, did you feel that buzz? Does it reach you guys with what you were doing?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, we're still a relatively young band. And the four of us have played in tons of other bands before this, continue to do so. But we're quite aware of what's happening, and you know, we make moves specifically to reach people in a specific way. You know, like Hidden History came out at the end of 2019 on purpose. I mean, there were other things that were in place, but yeah, we're definitely aware of what's going on online and the critiques and the positive stuff and the negative stuff. I try not to read about it too much, you know, because it gets overwhelming. You get in your head about it. But I think it's important to know your place within the environment that you live in, you know? So, yeah, we feel the buzz, and it contributes to us jamming. Like, all the negative feedback contributes to us positively, you know? All the positive feedback even more so. So, yeah, we keep our ear to the ground and see what's going on.
Yeah, I haven't heard anybody like you guys in a long time, in that I keep on finding layers. Music is like an onion, insofar as there's the core of what you guys are doing that you could play on an acoustic guitar. Sure, you know what I mean when I say that. You can get your riffs and you can hammer them out, and they sound wonderfully musical. But you've just built so many layers. It's like ear candy, and it just constantly comes at you. And the other thing that you've done, which I really appreciate, you haven't gone with those bloody awful lyric videos. You've actually done a proper video, which I think is crucial, is really important with the Stargate video there. Do you get feedback about that sort of thing too, the way that you are giving people an all-encompassing experience?
Yeah, I mean, the band represents an overarching idea, you know, and so the way we're going to operate is every aspect of it is going to be part of the same thing. Whether it's a video, a live show, the layout of the record, the riffs, pretty much the content of anything we do, any tour, any band we play with, every tour we go on, it has to make sense as to the overarching theme of what we're doing. And I'm really happy that some people are catching on to this idea. Like, there's plenty of bands that'll play whatever, Evil Metal Fest number 34 or whatever the hell.
Yep.
And I appreciate that. I love that. I love dark, evil, aggressive, heavy music. But I want to take it further than that. And you mentioned Chuck earlier. That was always his dream. You know, like the last Death record, Sound of Perseverance, that's like a milestone. That's almost an entirely different band from the records before that.
Yeah.
And so, for me personally, my vision is similar to Hit, where it's like, yeah, let the metal flow, heavy metal's awesome, but within that context, try to push it further in everything that you do as a band.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned and frame it the way you have about Chuck there, because I too feel exactly the same way about the Sound of Perseverance. And as an album that frequently is the last one in terms of, you know, those bullshit, you know, best albums by best band lists, and it's the one that comes in last, and I simply don't understand it, because I actually really rate Control Denied as well.
You know, it took me a while to appreciate it, definitely. Symbolic was my first Death record. And even that one is like, you know, it's extremely tech and very different from like Leprosy, let's say. But even so, Sound of Perseverance, it took me like, I heard it, and then maybe like a year later I came back to it and finally got it. But I think it's, it is pretty self-indulgent music for musicians. But I think that, I don't know, yeah, like you mentioned layers, I hear that in that record. There's so much classic heavy metal influence in that, like Judas Priest. I mean, there's a Painkiller cover at the end of the album, you know?
Yeah.
And to me, it was like him returning to heavy metal, but also in that same way pushing it forward in his own styles. Yeah.
It's a good way of framing it.
Maybe it'll have another round of appreciation in years to come. Who knows?
I think so. I think as people mature and they move into different phases of their life, and they're not just after blinding intensity constantly like it was with the first 2 or 3 albums with Chuck. Once you start letting the music breathe, which you guys do beautifully, there's a real ebb and a flow with your music, and it music or albums specifically, collections of work, singular bodies of collections of work, whether it be an EP or an album, must take a listener on a journey, which is what you guys have done with Hidden History of the Human Race, and what Chuck did on all of his albums. And that's what I think bands these days, I get sent so much stuff, especially with this layover happening through coronavirus. I'm getting sent to me up to 20 or 30 albums and EPs and just singles a week, you know, a combination of all 3 a week. But the albums that I generally am drawn toward are the ones that take you on a journey. So that's a question for you, is when you're crafting music, is it because sometimes artists aren't aware that they take bands on a journey. I'm sure Trey doesn't realise he does it as much as what he does with his work in Morbid Angel, but is it something that's intentful with you guys? Like, is it a strategy to take the listener on a journey, or does it just sort of work out that way because that's the way the songs fit together in the rehearsal room?
We love riffs, and we love a lot of different types of riffs, all sorts of different atmospheres, from ambient riffs to suffocation, brutal slam. And we also like 70s prog rock, which I think is pretty apparent on the newest album.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the journey aspect of it, I think it falls into place naturally, despite the fact that we do want it to come across that way. You know, anytime I focus on any one part of what I want a song to be like, it's usually not going to turn out that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to turn off my brain and be like, all right, well, what do I want to hear? And then string that together. And I think the linear songwriting lends itself to the journey aspect. You know, there isn't any like chorus or like A-B style within our music.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, the linear aspect is like, that is the journey. But then also the ebb and flow of the different atmospheres lends itself to that as well. And, I mean, we're happy with the outcome. We definitely want to portray that. But like I said, it's hard to focus on a specific idea and put it into place as opposed to just kind of shutting off and letting it take you there.
Letting the metal flow, I get it, yeah. And something else which is a bit of a masterstroke, very few bands are doing this these days because, look, I'm a musician and I understand it's a pain in the ass to do it this way, but listen to the results, recording analog. It's something that is just like a hand in a glove with you guys. So was that a decision that was made early on? Because I understand your earlier stuff was recorded on analog as well.
Yeah, so the EP was kind of a hodgepodge. That was an experiment. We didn't even have a bass player at the time when we wrote those songs. Mm-hmm. And then when we went in to record, it was kind of a disaster experience between us and the producer, missing guitar tracks. That was recorded digitally, track by track. And then eventually, after we got something salvageable, we sent it over to Damon, our Australian friend, actually.
Nice.
Yeah, from Mournful Congregation, Stargazer, all those excellent bands. And
okay.
He was friends with Paul and Jeff from a previous band that they toured in together, and he recorded bass over it. So yeah, that was all kind of pieced together digitally. So after that whole experience, we were like, man, it didn't quite turn out the way we'd hoped, because when we play it live, it sounds so much better. And again, we love 70s music, and all of our parents raised us listening to, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, all those awesome 60s and 70s bands. They all recorded live. Mm-hmm. So like we didn't even need to have a discussion about this. We were all on the same page. Just like, okay, we're gonna do it the way real, actual, like badass bands in the 70s did it. Just hammer away at it until you get the best take. And yeah, it was never much of a discussion. It was just like immediately agreed upon.
Well, it's for the benefit of the music, no doubt about that. And it hints at something else there, that it sounds like as though, because there's 4 of you in the band, I understand it, was certainly from the photos. You guys seem to agree on a lot, which is rare in a band. We know that. Now, did you guys, was it a process of attrition that you found each other? In other words, were there people coming in and going out of the band until you settled on this lineup? Can you tell me how the band formed and how you got this lineup together?
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting story. So Paul, the vocalist and other guitar player, he had an idea for this band a long time before it was put into play. Like he's the essential mastermind behind the name and what the band is about. And all 4 of us are on the same page about it, obviously. We pretty much agree on every point. But we kind of came together initially, I don't know, like it was like celestial mechanics putting all of us in the same room.
Yeah,
very
nice
strange feeling. But so Paul and Isaac met because of previous bands that they played in. Paul played in a band called Velnius. Isaac played in a band called Stoic Dissension. And this was all already in Colorado. Paul and Isaac met up to jam Funeral Doom, actually. They have another band called Abysmal Dimensions, which actually played their first show this last summer. But Paul had no idea that Isaac could play drums. And one day Isaac was messing around on the drum kit, and Paul was like, "Oh my God, you're amazing! How did I know? How did I not know this about you? It's crazy." And so he had the chops to play the style of death metal that Paul had envisioned. So they started jamming guitar, drums, and then I randomly met Paul at a pizza shop at his college town where I was going to school in Boulder, Colorado.
Nice, yeah.
And it was a total chance meeting. And he wrote down on a piece of paper all of these bands that he was a part of. Some of them were still just ideas at that point that hadn't existed. Blood Incantation was one of those names. Spectral Voice was as well. And then it must have been, I don't know, at least another year after that, after I like randomly met him, I went to a party of my old bandmate, this band I played in called Stillborn Fawn, his girlfriend's house. And Paul and the other Vilnius dudes were there. And that's the first time Paul and I were able to actually like sit down and talk about music and guitar. So I joined pretty much that night. So then it was just me, Paul, and Isaac, and we had a hard time finding a bass player. We never really auditioned anyone. We were thinking about doing the time goal thing and just doing the three guitars instead of a bass. Yeah. Because that was around the time we discovered that, which was in, 2013.
Yep. Great band, by the way, Time Goal. Yeah.
Amazing band. Oh, my God. I'm constantly trying to write their full-length record.
Nice.
That's like... but yeah, so the three of us jammed, wrote all the songs for the EP. Yeah, we had Damon play the bass for that, and then around, I can't remember when was Starspawn recorded, in 2015. So it took us around 2 years to find a bass player who was Jeff, who had already played with Paul in Vilnius, and he was down to do the fretless fingerstyle, and him and Paul had been in Vilnius for a long time together, toured Europe numerous times, so that connection was already there. And I'd hung out with him a few times before that, so we all, prior to playing any music together at all, had known about one another through various different avenues. So once we were all in the same room together, I mean, it was like, that's it. We're brothers for life. This is the journey we're on. And there was never any, like, sit down to make sure you're on board with this idea or this kind of thing. It was just kind of mentally pre-agreed upon cycle of life. It's just we got into this room and everything's been chugging away ever since.
Yeah, well, it works. There's no doubt about that. And the other thing, you guys certainly, you found each other, you get along, you're good mates from the sounds of things, but it all connects on stage as well, not just on the recording. You guys have got the triumvirate. So it works on stage, works in the studio, and you're good mates. So it sounds like we can look forward to music coming from you guys for a long time. And I just want to clarify what I mean by about works on stage. I don't think I've seen a modern heavy metal band as accomplished as you guys from a musicianship standpoint, certainly from the videos that I've seen. Now, the videos, there's a recent performance, it's a 2019 performance, and it looks effortless, and I've always noticed that. I'm a big fan of the late great Ralph Santola, and I said that to him whenever he plays it. All these beautiful neoclassical leads that he was doing, but it looks like he's looking off into the corner of the room whilst he's doing it. Something similar is happening with you guys, and as I mentioned, I'm a musician, and I know how hard it is to really get that right, but what we're really seeing is hundreds, if not thousands of hours of continuous rehearsal from you guys to make sure it all works. And maybe it sounds, I mean, for anybody out there listening that wants to hear a band that sounds very close to what they do on an album live, but you lose nothing of the performance side of things, and that's the key point. You guys are the band.
Thank you. I mean, we try to... I remember when I saw Iron Maiden for the first time. I'd already been obsessed with them for years, and it was even better live than it was on record. And I was like, holy shit, man, how is that even possible? So I've always been chasing that idea of just like, if you're gonna play live and go on tour, it's like, it's got to be the whole shebang, the whole experience. Not only is just like, the show aspect is important, but the sound and like capturing the right tonalities is very difficult based on like every venue you're playing, and like all the rooms are so, there's so many different types of acoustics, but I don't know. It seems like we've found some sort of formula that works for us. As far as it being effortless, I'm happy you think so. It's definitely extremely difficult. And yeah, we do practice a lot. Even like we'll come back from tour and then maybe just wait a week and then start rehearsing again, But we all like to play. I mean, I work at a bar, but that's not my life, My life is playing guitar and being in the practice space and pursuing this artistic ideal I have.
Please keep on doing it, Morris. It's really important, and I've said this a few times as an artist. Yeah, you're one of those artists, and you're a band by extension that improves people's lives because they're listening to you. And I can't remember who it was that I made this point with, but I was talking to Pete from Vader. I've spoken to so many great people in the course of my time doing this, but great heavy metal acts as the Prozac in the absence of it, if that makes sense. It is what makes people feel like waking up in the morning because they look forward to listening to the music when they might have a lot of other things going on in their life, and people don't really understand that about a lot of dyed-in-the-wool heavy metal fans. We live for the riff. We live for the drums, the vocal, the bass, the whole thing coming together to form this great heavy metal architecture that you guys are doing. So when you guys are writing, is it one of those situations, for example, where you capture some classic riffs, some great riffs that you're really happy with, maybe put a drum beat underneath it and put it into the cloud and say to the guys, hey, do something to this, and when we get to the rehearsal room, we'll see what we've all come up with?
Our song structure, or the writing process works in a few different ways. Oftentimes, someone will come to practice with a skeleton of like an almost full song, but that's just riffs put together, not necessarily a drum beat or a lead or a harmony or a vocal part. So oftentimes it'll be a skeleton of an idea that then the other three members fill out. And side B of Hidden History, Isaac wrote that whole progression of riffs, But that doesn't mean he wrote like the ambient part in the middle. We just did that in the studio. But the idea for that part was there. And then the idea for the end, for like the classical guitar outro and the epic solo, that kind of came later, as to build upon the journey aspect of it. So yeah, someone will bring a skeleton and we'll fill it out, and that can go in so many different directions. Probably the original version of that 18-minute long track sounds entirely different from how it came to be. And then other times we'll have a riff that we just jammed at practice randomly, that we just found in the ether, and hold on to it for like a year or two until we need it again to fit in this perfect place. Oftentimes we'll hold on to riffs for a really long time and remember them, and then like they have the perfect time for them to come back into play. Inner Path to Outer Space, that was pretty much that first riff in it, that like really ethereal one. We'd had that written for like a year and a half before we decided to use it.
That's a stunning riff.
Actually, I had a recording of it. Yeah, I had a recording of that riff on my phone from some practice where I like randomly played it when someone went to the bathroom or something. And then I remember I was like going through riffs on my phone. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And I had to like reteach myself how to play it. And and then it came into play when it needed to. So yeah, it just kind of depends.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Inner Paths to Outer Space, because it probably is my favourite cut from you guys, and the reason for that is the way it builds. You've got this beautiful. It sounds very similar to something to what King's X would do. Ty Tabor, the great guitarist in King's X, who's very much influenced by Rush. So I totally understand where the prog elements are coming from with you guys. So I get it. Believe me, I totally understand it. And what you're doing with that cut there, though, is you're putting it through a death metal template. And out comes this. It's very hard to describe the techniques that you're using across there, because being a guitarist as well, you're using a lot of sustain. You're making sure the note holds on and it rings. And I don't think I've seen a better marriage of visuals to music than what you guys have done with the video in ages. I mean, I can't, off the top of my head at the moment, I can't name a modern video. I think Nada Sadek did a great job with the Morbid Angel the Morbid Angel video for, I can't remember the song that they put with that. You know, the one I'm talking about where it's outer space, and I think that looks pretty good, but it's not quite at the level that your one here is at. So, who did the video for this one here? Who did you commission to do that for you?
So actually, Central Media found this person for us. They'd worked with him before. I've never met this person, so actually I can't even remember the guy's name. Unfortunately, I can look it up in a second. But I remember we were on tour when this whole thing was coming together, so it's kind of hazy in my mind. But Paul wrote like a very detailed description of what we wanted the video to be like, and we had the idea for it a while before we were actually in the process of recording the record. And yeah, Century Media wanted like an actual music video. They suggested a lyric video and all that kind of stuff. I don't know, it seems a little modern and, you know, kind of played out. So Paul wrote this like insane detailed email of just like what needs to be presented in this, how, all this crazy shit. And then Century Media sent us some stuff the guy had done before, and it looked pretty trippy, but man, he knocked it out of the park. It was, I remember we were getting like little clips at a time, like maybe 10, 15 seconds at a time, and just what a teaser sitting in the van, seeing that on a little like iPhone screen. And then when the full thing came out, we were actually still on tour. I remember that night we got into our hotel room, and it was the first thing we watched. It was amazing. I mean, I feel the same way you do, because the song is there, but those visual aspects of it, I'm watching someone else's art, you know?
Yeah, totally. I've watched it many times, a couple of dozen times. And again, like your music, there's new things that I keep seeing the entire time. I mean, this Stargate concept, is that something that your bandmate came up with? Or, I mean, it's just a brilliant concept, taking you through the ethereal.
That concept of, I mean, that is essentially what the band is about, you know? All of the lyrics and mythology and images tie back into that. It's like multi-dimensional travel, you know, past lives, future lives, all congregating into the same place and what it all means. And I think the video portrays that very well.
It portrays that beautifully. That's such a good way of putting it, and that's kind of how I felt about it. I have very vivid dreams, you see, and when I think about what some of my dreams sort of touch on, it's like what the fellow who's put this video together has done here. I love that outer space stuff. That stuff where we are such a minute. We don't even register in the grand scale of the cosmos, and it's our ego that convinces us that we do. But your video goes some way to explaining that in a lot of ways, and it feels like I'm having a moment with the cosmos. There you go. When I'm watching that video, and your music is playing alongside of it, obviously.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so I found the guy's name. It's Miles Scarin, and his website is crystalspotlight.com. So I feel like
Spotlight. Okay.
I owe him a shout out at least. I'd love to meet the guy someday. But
well, he's fantastic.
Yeah, these concepts are, you know, they're difficult to understand if you're not a person interested in. I mean, I'm wondering how to phrase this. If you're someone that's just like living day to day, and you've got your routine and your schedule, etc., and you're kind of like in this rut, same day, like over and over and over again, it's difficult to understand these concepts because they're naturally against what you're doing all the time. So I feel like our band could be a good vehicle to bring it to a more like comprehensible level. When we're not claiming we have any answers, you know? I just want to ask the questions.
But I think that's what we're here to do, mate, as humans. We're here to ask questions, and what our ego does is it forces us to believe that there's an answer out there somewhere, and for the most part there isn't. I was just talking to my wife about this last night. Like, life itself, the whole fact that we came into existence makes zero sense just via science. There's really only a hypothesis, which is Darwinism, that talks about survival of the fittest, which goes some way to explaining, but we simply do not understand how we obtain sentient consciousness, and that's how we've invented religion, to try to give an answer to that. And look, I understand that.
The God hole is huge.
Yeah, it's very
like
strange.
a massive driving aspect of history.
Yeah, I can't understand how we're even here. I mean, it's whether Elon's right and we're all in a big simulation. I need some work to try to understand what he's talking about. Need to do some work to understand what he's talking about there. But I've got kids, so I can see the majesty of life repeating itself and the unbound love that I feel toward my children. I get that, and if that's what we're here to do is to feel that, so be it. But we're here for it's not even a fleeting moment in time on a cosmic scale. But here we are, and we have an opportunity to create and to be something that we would otherwise not be if we didn't have this flesh vehicle. And that's why I think it's so important from a musical standpoint that someone like myself gets behind what you're doing to try to spread the word, to get you as many other people as possible that haven't heard you guys, because it's something that's extremely worthwhile. And I hope this isn't too broad a tangent for me to make, so work with me here when I make this point. But it's music like yours that actually strives to bring humanity forward. Okay, we live in a commercial society, being in the United States and Australia, so we can pretty much buy whatever we want when we've got the money, so there's not really any challenge to that outside of earning the funds to do it. But it's not spiritual growth. Music like yours, the way it inspires, is spiritual growth. It's a part of that great religious fear, if you like, that forces us to ask even more questions, I think, and that's why I think it's so important what you guys are doing.
I resonate with that. I do. And what it makes me think of is the, ancient societies, say pyramids, for example, classic concept. But, tons of musicians in the past have explored this as well. Like Paul Horn has a record called Inside the Great Pyramid. And frequencies resonate in different ways around these megalithic structures. And energy works in different ways around these ancient megalithic structures. So I certainly believe that when music is created in a certain pattern, in a certain form, that happens to click, that it can make you feel this sense of wonder, and these questions will come to you naturally based on the frequencies around you. And that wasn't our intention when we wrote a lot of this music. Certainly want it to be, but every time we play these crazy long songs, or any song we have, I get filled with this just like inspiration of wonder. It's just, I don't know, it takes me to an entirely different plane of existence.
Yeah, it does for me too. Yeah, music has always done that. We mentioned Chuck earlier, of course, and his music, when I first started leaning into that, same thing with Trey and Morbid Angel, especially with them when I was a young fella. It was like I listened to it when I was going to sleep, and it is about tuning into the frequency that individual is on. So whilst I might be listening, let's pick you for example, I might be listening to your guitar playing, I'm actually trying to tune into your mental wavelength of what you were thinking and what you were trying to achieve when you were creating these riffs. And if they were just flowing through you, as Van Halen often says happens, who knows from where this great music comes from. We're really merely acting as a rod for the lightning the musical lightning to pass through us. I do, having written stuff in the past, and I've gone on week-long binges where I've written just about all the music I've ever come up with in my life, and then outside of that, it's just been the well's dry, and I don't understand it. And to your exact point, just to wrap it up, it's about frequency, isn't it? Being on the right frequency.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I said. Like I said earlier, sometimes focusing on it too much, it's like it's never going to come out because you're trying so hard to do it. But yeah, I don't know, that mystical experience of finding the right riff or any artistic expression, really, for visual art or anything else, it's remarkable, and that's what raises the question. It's like, what is that? What aspect of human life are you tuning into when that happens?
What's your take on when we talk about ancient civilizations? And for the life of me, I can't remember the guy's name. I've got to try and find out before. I can put it always in the notes when I do my narrative aspect of the podcast episode. But there's a guy that talks with a lot of credibility. He was recently on Joe Rogan's show about the age of civilization being way older than what we're crediting it as being. Now, we know that because the first thing that comes to mind, which has been proven, I understand, is that the watermarks that are on the pyramids are something in the vicinity of 20 to 30,000 years old. not a couple of thousand years old. So the whole idea of the oldest pyramids only being built sort of 4,000 or 5,000 years ago is wrong. Now, I've always felt that anyway, because why would pyramids be popping up all around the world in societies that had literally had nothing to do with each other? So pyramids pop up in South America, Central America, Thailand, Cambodia. They are everywhere, yet they pop up at different times in history when, as far as we understand, there was not the technology to transmit the necessary engineering blueprints, if you like, on how to build pyramids. So why on earth are all of these civilizations and societies coming up with the same structure? It's just a constant thing. So do you think that, or I know it's a very broad question to be asking you, mate, but of course I wouldn't believe for a minute that you'd you would take accepted wisdom as law, but do you have a theory behind how we've evolved? Is it from Sumeria and then right the way up to now?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. So there's the massive question you just proposed about the pyramids. How could that possibly be happening? Like, with the distance, people didn't have communication skills we do now. But on top of that, the imagery surrounding the pyramids, like all the religious structures portraying like plumed serpents, all carrying this weird little bucket, all wearing a watch. There's lots of crazy similarities between, let's say, like Aztecs and then like people that lived in ancient Egypt, for example. And there's a great documentary series on Netflix, maybe it's still up there, called The Pyramid Code, and that talks about the water erosion and how carbon dating didn't date the Sphinx properly. It's actually older than we thought, and that like throws all of history up in the air. But as far as how all these things could happen simultaneously in different parts of the world, I mean, the answer is in the cosmos, in my opinion. There has to be some sort of connection to the stars and a greater frequency and energy that people felt despite the fact that they were so far away. Some sort of hive mind structure, like the pyramids, for example, would connect people and bring them to a higher elevation of consciousness where they can communicate through vast distances. I don't want to use the word aliens or like multidimensional beings, but it's hard to not go that direction when you're talking about something so inexplicable.
Look, in the absence of all other explanations, the alien one isn't a bad one. It's just that I don't think people have dived. Tony Hitchens, I think, is the guy's name now that I remember it. But as I say, I'll put it in the notes when I do the narrative to the podcast episode. But yeah, it's very hard, and you can understand why people dive into, broadly speaking here, conspiracy theories about us being a product of an alien civilization or what have you, because it's so bizarre. To your point that there is an elevation in consciousness at some point in time. Clearly, it must be that. Otherwise, it couldn't just be a single civilization that goes around the world showing people how to build pyramids. It didn't happen that way. Otherwise, there'd be there'd be breadcrumbs. There'd be historical breadcrumbs.
I do think that there were like certain mechanics that we've lost over time, because also some of the structures are so perfectly fit together, and there's like perfectly carved wheels and tiny holes within that like a stonemason could hardly do now, given all the tools we have. So there's more to it than that. Like, there's a weird mechanical thing going on too, as far in addition to like the brain aspect of it and the consciousness and like the connectivity of it. I don't know. So it's a weird web. I'm still trying to figure it out, obviously. And I remember a lot of our lyrics deal with that as well.
Yeah, they do too. Actually, let's talk about the lyrical side of things. So it does deal with all of these sorts of things. So is it a team effort coming up with the lyrics, or can you tell me how the lyrics are written?
Team effort coming up with the concepts and theories behind them, and then Paul puts it to actual form. And he is a very well-read very well-spoken individual, so he is the right person for the job.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't dived into the lyrical side of things that much, although I can certainly see that there are lyrics available online, which I've read a little bit of, but I connect with it obviously on a musical standpoint because music's always spoken to me. Actually, when I first heard, was watching the video, because that video, if I'm not mistaken, that's there is some lyrics to it, isn't there? But there's just not too much. The Inner Path song.
No, that's an instrumental.
There's
just one gurgle at the end, but there's fully instrumental.
Yeah, I thought you guys were...
It is funny that you say that because it feels like his lyrics about them actually being...
Yeah. What's saying something? I don't know, you guys have tapped into something very ethereal because your music does talk to people. It's not just a straight-up musical interface that you get from you guys. There's some sort... You're definitely imbued with DNA from somewhere else, whether you realise it or not, because something happens whenever I listen to your music. I just feel different. It's a feeling thing. It's incredible. You know, it's the same thing as...
It is very intense and scary sometimes.
Yeah. Now, I saw... Let's talk about the guitar gear that you've chosen, because obviously a guitarist as accomplished as yourself chooses things with a great intent. Now, I couldn't help but notice that you had an Ironbird. I think it was either for sale or you were giving praise to it on your Facebook page. And, of course, Trey from Morbid Angel is very famous for using Ironbirds. But it's not just an Ironbird in your arsenal, I could see clearly. So can you tell me the sort of guitars that help you in your journey here?
Yeah, so 80s BC Riches specifically are, they're just shredder machines. They were built with specifications that work for me perfectly. You know, the necks are not too thick, not too small. They all came with Kahlers or licensed Floyd Roses, so you could do all sorts of insane dive bombs and crazy noises on them. Generally, I feel, 60s, 70s, and 80s guitars are where it's at just because of the scale of things. I don't know what happened. I guess, these companies all got bigger and got bought out by larger conglomerates, and people that didn't know the trade as well would try to recreate what that company had been famous for previously, which BC Rich is still actually trying to do. They're doing a whole, they're revamping their entire line of guitars to try to make them more like the 80s ones, but even so, they're missing some sort of key element. And I'm no luthier, but I can tell just by touching it. Yeah, I have plenty of other guitars, but for the music we create, 80s BC Riches really lend themselves wonderfully to our tone.
They look great too. That's the other thing. They visual element. Yeah, it's an important, often important and overlooked side of things. And there's very few guitarists in metal that look great playing a Strat, except for Trevor Perez from Obituary, of course. And I've had a chat to him about his use of Strats. It's just what works for him, and you can tell it works for him because of what the band ends up sounding like. But it takes ages, doesn't it? I went through a few basses before I arrived at the Music Man back in the day, and I've never left. But once you find, yeah, it's very consistent. The only problem is it's active, like all Music Mans are. So you can be sometimes like the battery's fine, but the connections get loose in the battery compartment. So I've been on stage a couple of times and pop, off it goes, and you're like, what the hell's wrong? And I've said this many times on the podcast that for the non-musicians out there, I think I've worked out between my bass or guitar and what comes out of the PA, there's something like 35 active points of failure. So good luck trying to figure out what it is in the moment. As you can, I'm sure you've had plenty go wrong.
Yeah. Oh man, the pedals and all the little patch cables.
With pedals that just magnifies it.
Yeah, I use EMGs in my Ironbirds, and Paul uses the standard super distortions that they came with in the 80s. They just kind of happened to work out that way. Every one that I bought would come with EMGs, so we decided to stick with it just to have some sort of difference in tone, so it's not just two of the same thing happening.
What are you using, Kempers, or what's the effects device you're using?
We both have pedal boards with, it's not really all that crazy. It's just the right amount of chorus, delay, and reverb. It's like 90% of what it is. Paul has a flanger that he uses occasionally on a very wide setting. And then I have 2 delays that I'll activate at the same time sometimes to create this kind of like Pink Floyd ping pong effect.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
We also we do this sort of stereo trick with our cabinets where it's called an X-Wing. So if you're looking at the stage, my cab will be on the top right and on the bottom left, and Paul's will be reversed. So regardless of which side of the stage you're standing on, you can hear both guitars. And it really helps with like the stereo functions for all the effects,
there you go.
Especially delay.
Yeah. And you're able to do that on tour, no dramas?
Yeah.
I
mean, it's just we just set up. I mean, that's how we practice. Also, it's just 2 full stacks, and the 412s are X-winged, and then bass and drums in the middle.
Okay, I get it. So you're getting an equal, when you're standing in front of your setup, so to speak, you're getting an equal amount of your other guitarist stuff coming through as well. So you're hearing both equally, not just your stuff.
Yeah, it's like a self-monitoring system as well. So if you're playing a stage where like the sound guy isn't quite getting what's going on or whatever, you still have some sort of a saving grace with this thing because I can hear what Paul's doing, and the drums are always insanely loud, so I'm okay there.
Yeah, great drummer, by the way. Gosh, I haven't dived into each individual.
Isaac is amazing.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, very much. Reminds me a little bit of Richard Christie, actually. You know, the drummer from Sound of Perseverance.
Yeah, he'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
He would very much appreciate that.
Yeah, very, again, busy but musical. I just can't stand busy when it doesn't do anything, but when it's busy and musical and it's really adding to the overall experience, then I'm all for it. And I've spoken to some of the greatest drummers of all time, like Pete Sandoval and Gene Hoglan, and these are guys that do it naturally. And Isaac does it really well as well. So metal drummers out there, you got to listen to Isaac.
The other secret ingredient there is that he's also an excellent guitar player.
Yeah, I've made this point so often.
The melody.
Yeah, I've made this point so often. I've got to tell you, Morris, I've said great drummers are often great guitarists or bassists. They can play stringed instruments.
What bastard. I'm so jealous.
Yeah, where does it come from? It's incredible to have all of these skills that some drummers have got.
It's amazing. I wish I could play the drums as half as good as he can, but I don't know. It's just, I've tried, and it's just, I can't like have like octopus arms and legs. I just don't get it.
Well, I think some drummers are born. It's that simple. I think to a great extent, you have a natural talent with an instrument. It's just whether or not you find that instrument and you develop that talent. I'm sure the greatest guitarists that ever lived never picked up the guitar, if you know what I'm saying, working on that basis.
Yeah, I hear you.
It's some people, and I've seen some people bash away to guitar for years and years, and they sound like as though they're an 8-year-old that's just found it a couple of minutes ago. and it might be overstating the case just a little, but the point remains that if you haven't got the talent for something, it's just, if it's a personal pursuit, so be it, but it's probably not something. I know for me, for example, I'm a much better bass player than a guitarist. Actually, I'm 100 times the bass player than I am the guitarist. It's just, I don't know, it's just one of those things. I hit the guitar too hard, but when I get onto the bass, I find I can just got the right amount of torque in my fingers, if that makes sense, on the hand, and I just sit at the right level and I can sort of buzz along doing what it is that I'm doing. But when it comes to the guitar, I hit the bloody thing way too hard. It's just...
And that's, I mean, you have an incredible talent then, because I remember back in middle school, you know, everyone wanted to play guitar, and then like all the kids that like couldn't figure out how to do it would be like, well, I'll play bass just so I can be in your band, you know? But then eventually some people fall into place feeling like, no, bass is actually a real instrument. It's not guitar light. And I think to this day, you know, I'm sure there's plenty of people that don't consider it like it's not as in the forefront, so not as many people are thinking about it, but it's crucial.
Yeah, it is. And look, I grew up in an era with guys like Steve DiGiorgio, Les Claypool, Billy Gould, and then I got into the disco greats like Brothers Johnson, Bernard Edwards, Stanley Clarke. I know he's more of a funk and R&B guy, but the point remains, when you're listening to those people there, to your exact point, the bass isn't just downstream from the guitar. The bass is an extremely powerful, important instrument in its own right, and your bassist does a mighty fine job, I've got to say too, particularly live with that tarantula technique, that Alex Webster thing that he's got going on, and headbanging and stuff at the same time.
I mean, we've all gotten so much better over the years, but like sometimes I watch Jeff play and I'm like, holy shit. That is
nice, yeah.
Crazy, especially with the fretless bass. Like, it's kind of guessing where you're going.
Oh, fretless Fretless is, I know Jack Bruce was basically said if you're not playing a fretless bass, you're not playing a real bass. But I think he would say that, the cranky old bastard. But the point about the fretless bass is, to your exact point, you are guessing many times, especially when you're going as fast as what you are where you are. But it sounds like as though he's got the intonation thing down pat.
Yeah, he's very good at it. And I mean, those in-between notes, I think, are pretty crucial to our sound as well.
Yeah.
Makes it more trippy and psychedelic.
The psychedelic aspect, yeah, absolutely. So how do you guys handle touring? Have you been over to Europa and have you done the solid trek around there that a lot of American and Australian bands do?
Oh, what's that? Sorry.
Gone to Europe. I call Europa. Sorry, just a play on words that I've got. Yeah, but have you toured Europe? Have you done the heavy touring thing?
Oh yeah, many. I mean, we've done how many? 5 full European tours at least. We were supposed to go back this summer to do a second round of some of those open air festivals like Party Son and Brutal Assault. But that is up in the air as of now. But yeah, I mean, we've pretty much after Starspawn came out, we toured incessantly for 3 years, all over the place. We went to Australia in when was it? September 2017. We played 4 shows with that band Arcturus from Norway.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I don't remember that. Geez, I must have been tuned in that time. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was 3 years ago, you know, so it was a different time. I mean, we've played all sorts of shows from small to big, and this new record has really taken it to bigger heights, like you said, and we hope to be able to continue that trajectory. But yeah, I mean, we've been on the road nonstop, and me, Paul, and Jeff also play in another band together called Spectral Voice, and that band also has toured a lot, so it's been nonstop, to say the least.
Yeah, I can imagine, yeah. So how do you, when you're touring, and I've asked this question a lot of touring artists, with the amount that you've done, how do you not murder each other? Is it just a matter of giving each other space and being really familiar with each other's habits, so to speak?
We already spend all of our time together at home in the practice space or going out to eat or whatever. So it's kind of like second nature. I mean, we know the certain things about one another that'll like push a button or whatnot. And we've definitely honed in on making it a more positive, easygoing experience over the years, you know, not having like a stupid outbreak about, oh, you drank my Coca-Cola or whatever the hell. Or even just like seats in the van or who's driving, whatever. We do a lot of this stuff ourselves. And so it's, we're all equally stressed and tired most of the time. So we've, I don't know, it's just kind of a natural understanding and respect for one another that makes it easy and sustainable.
How did you go on that Australian tour there? Because I found the dates, and I'm just looking on my iPhone here. You played the Triffid near me in Brisbane. Was it a decent tour, a memorable one?
It was amazing, man. That I'd never been to Australia before, and Arcturus is a band we've all loved for a while. So it was a pretty insane opportunity, and the whole thing about it, like the package, just like everything we were offered. We had people help us set up our stuff, which we'd never had before. It was like a really eye-opening experience, and you know, we flew from show to show, which we'd never done before because we're usually in a van, unless it's like a one-off fly, like a fly-out fest or something like that. And I don't know, we were treated amazing. The guy who brought us down, Matthew Chalk, works for Southern Extremities Productions. And yeah, it was an amazing experience. And I hope to be able to do it again soon once all this comes down.
Yeah, I haven't heard of him, man. I haven't heard of Southern Extremists. There you go. So it's I've got to do some research after this conversation, I think, because there's it always surprises me, mate, for a relatively small country. I know we've got a couple of major cities, but there's bugger all in between, let me assure you. Everybody lives in the major cities in Australia because we've got to, because it's just too inhospitable elsewhere. But the amount of...
There's so many different levels to underground and overground, it doesn't surprise, back then I'd be like, well, if you're not paying attention, then you're an idiot, and have like a chip on my shoulder. But over time I've realized, man, there's so many different avenues of finding out about music, and there's so many different promoters, and even like sometimes giant package tours, people that have been lifelong fans won't know about just because of the specific promoter that did the show. It's just... There's so many variables up in the air that it's hard, and that's why promoting is a whole other game of its own, So yeah, I fully understand that.
Yeah, it's the amount of. I spoke to someone the other night. There was a major tour that happened over here with Van Halen, Aerosmith, and I think the promoter lost something in the vicinity of $15 million. I mean, that's...
Jesus Christ.
Well, that's at a scale that I simply can't comprehend. That's a couple of lifetimes of income right there. So, as a business, it's extremely fraught with danger. And Dicey from Soundworks and John down there, who looks after Nuclear Blast in Australia, these guys are seasoned veterans, so they get it. And I enjoy talking to them insofar as asking them not too different questions that I'm asking you now about what they've done with music and the success. But I've always understood that there's a very thin line between going under and profitability, and there's not a lot of warning oftentimes. And is that how you find things too, like on the business side of things as a band? It's bloody hard.
Being in a band, especially one that's touring and trying... Okay, so I guess there's two different ways to see it from my perspective. There's the artistic aspect of it. So I want to create music. I want to be in a band. Whether you go on tour or not doesn't matter. More about releasing records and the output, the appreciation of the output. And then there's a band that wants to do that, but also the live show is a massive aspect of that. So obviously finances have to come into play to make it sustainable, especially if you're trying to make a career out of it and not just like touring and then going home and working whatever job that allows you to leave X amount of months out of the year, which sucks. I've had to do that for years. It's annoying. I don't want to do it. So getting everyone on board is very difficult, because so many bands will have a guy that has a kid that can't leave for like years at a time, or a more important job or whatever. We happen to be in a very lucky position where we're all kind of maniacs and are down to tour most out of the year. So yeah, finances are extremely fickle. I mean, they used to be way more so than they are now. The thing about touring is that most of the time, if you do it right, you'll break even. It's not all that hard. Like the money you need for gas to get to the next show, you'll likely get at the show before through merch or even any sort of door deal. Like, even if you play exclusively like pizza shops and cafes,
Yeah.
I've seen tours at that level to the one we did with Cannibal Corpse and Morbid Angel, So the most fickle aspect about it is once you get into a certain echelon. And that's, then the numbers game is like more about merch. And your guarantees can grow, but it kind of just depends on how your records are doing, which I haven't seen too much of that yet because we're only on our second full length, and this is the one we're really going to get a lot of bigger tour offers for, which I'm very excited about.
Yep.
But yeah, the finances are generally fickle in this whole entertainment industry, whether it be the promoter or the band. It's so oftentimes you just you see the opportunity and you run with it all the way to the end. And I think what most forward-thinking bands or promoters have done is secure themselves a specific niche and place within this world to where they can expect something at some level of consistency. And so I think that for a band that can happen 3 or 4 records in. You solidify your existence as this creative force that people will hopefully just you're there, you don't have to prove anything to anyone after a certain point. And when that happens, your finances are more or less stable based on where they were with the record beforehand. For promoters, I'm not really sure how it works, but this is what I've seen just from what's happened to us, for example.
But
it is essentially fickle.
But you have a great product, though. This is the thing. You have a great product. If you know what I'm saying when I mean that, I understand it's music, but I'm just talking about it from a business perspective. You have something that people want, so of course you're going to be dealing with, well, the hope will be that you're dealing with more credible people than a lot of people have to deal with in the underground. We've had, I'll bring this up, I suppose, or I'll talk about this in a bit more detail, because we've had a few tours go under in Australia where I think Hypocrisy, no, it wasn't Hypocrisy, who was it? There was a couple of bands anyway at that level. Once Human, that's right, Once Human with Logan Matter from Machine Head and Lauren Hart, the Australian vocalist. They tried to tour, and it was Baldface Stag Productions in Australia, I think, where it fell under. And I think sometimes, I don't know anything about the detail except that it did fall and it didn't go through. So I'm only hypothesising here, not making any allegations whatsoever. But this is a very fickle business, and if you haven't got, especially when you're first starting out as a promoter, enough money to basically give a guarantee that a band isn't going to be sort of trying to pawn off their guitars to purchase plane trips back to the US or wherever they're from, you've got to have a good setup. Yeah, you've got to have a bloody good setup. And look, I've looked into it, but it just seems, I've attended some shows here in Australia where I thought they'd be packed out, and there's like 20 of us. 30 of us.
I mean, it's got to be especially difficult for you guys. You know, it's definitely a very different environment from what happens in America. A lot of bands will come here and like make their money back on the plane tickets to Europe, which is like it's half as expensive. You know, flying to Australia from America is like, it's insane. So I mean, I think that as a promoter in Australia, you already have to be starting out with a pretty large amount of money to be able to.
I'd say so. Yeah, I'd say you're right. I'd say you'd have to have at least maybe tens of thousands of dollars, if not $100,000 behind you before you could do it really effectively, and then say take on the losses in say the first 2 or 3 and put them down to a learning experience. Sorry, that dog next door always barks. As the fella's gone to Darwin and his dog's just there barking its head off all the time, and short of yelling at it. I love dogs. We've got a bull terrier, but it's this little yappy thing. Lovely dog, by the way, but it just doesn't shut up.
I love bull terriers.
Oh, yeah, bull terriers are fantastic.
They're so funny.
Yeah.
I have a bull terrier corgi mix. He's a puppy right now, actually.
Holy wow.
So strange.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that before.
Very strange looking dog. Very cute, but short and stocky with a big head.
Is there a photo of him on your Facebook feed?
No, I can send you them though.
If you, I'm curious because my wife's a member of the Queensland Bull Terrier Society, and she does house inspections because, as you know, bull terriers are originally bred for fighting, so a lot of these idiots buy them for fighting. Now, she does the inspections to ensure that they're going to go to a decent home if they're an abandoned dog from a pound, or somehow somebody contacts the society and says, look, I've got this bull terrier, can you rehome him? But, you get the usual assortments of dickheads and scumbags that want to adopt, in inverted commas, these dogs that have got a bad reputation. But as you and I both know, they're big sweethearts, these dogs. They don't have any fighting bone in them anymore. The temperament's been completely bred out of them. So a lot of them end up just being bait for a pig dog, a more violent dog.
It's an unfortunate stigma. Pit bulls were illegal in the county of Denver for a while.
Is that just the sort of people that were owning them? Is that where the stigma comes from, as opposed to the dogs themselves? Because
I'm not too familiar with the history of why, but if I had to guess, it'd just be from like attacks at dog parks, or like some owners that were maybe not stable enough to have a dog that had so much power.
Yeah, that's a big issue. We actually got a police dog trainer in, a British guy, in to help us with ours very early on in the piece. We got him in about a couple of weeks after we first got Zanzibar's our dog's name, and when he goes, okay, with a dog like this, yes, you're right to bring me in, but training's only going to start at about 6 months of age, because that's the only time. Up until that point, they're just going to screw around so badly, you're going to have your hands enough full. So he didn't, of course, he was virtually untrainable up until that point, but my wife did really well with him, actually. But you have to have a heavy hand with them, otherwise they run all over you. And to this day, he's getting into old age, so he's 10 years of age this year. But he's been a wonderful companion to my kids, to us. He's got a good deep bark that scares the daylights out of anybody. We get people crossing the road when we're walking with him to try and get away from us. But he's more timid than a bloody Labrador. They just looks different.
Yeah. Yeah, the Chug is my dog's name, but he's just a goofball for now. He's only 4 months old, but he doesn't have much fight in him. He's just like a jolly little lazy guy.
That's great. Yeah, well, that's killer. Yeah. Hey, I'll make this one my final question for you then. And look, we've talked a lot about your music and a lot of the greats that I think you richly deserve to join them in those halls, those hallowed halls. But is there any heavy metal around in 2020, relatively new stuff that you'd recommend to people that you enjoy listening to?
Yeah, actually, there's a band from Australia called Faithless Burial.
Nice.
That is superb. They've got the intensity and like technicality of immolation mixed with just like that perfect era of like 1993 era Suffocation, which is like technical riffs but catchy. The vocals are super guttural, but not like pig squeal style, just really brutal.
The pig squeal thing, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Pig squeals are not my thing.
No, God, no, they're not my thing either, I can tell you that. Yeah, I've just found them on Facebook here on my iPhone. Yeah, Faceless Burial, there you go. Mate, there's so many great bands out there. This is the thing about picking up you guys very late in the piece from when you first started, and there's just I sometimes feel like my favourite band I've yet to hear. Because and there's this myth out there that, look, I love the classic bands that I've mentioned: Death, Cynic, Morbid Angel, Atheist, Pestilence. You can continue on, you know that, the Obituary, Cannibal Corpse, Deicide. But if people aren't supporting the new bands, what have we got? You're just constantly listening to stuff from 1989 to 1995.
You know, and there's a constant stream of good bands. You just gotta. It's hard to find for sure, because there's so many of them. Like death metal is exploding again, you know, and there's a lot of bands that are kind of just, they're fine. You know, touring so much, you see so many metal bands. It's like, oftentimes I'm just like, I can't even listen to this. I can't even listen to metal in the van 90% of the time.
I'm with you.
But every once in a while, it's just like, wow, this is a breath of fresh air. It's amazing. And yeah, Faceless Burial is the one that comes to mind off the top of my head.
What do you guys? It's a good point. Just to go back into the touring thing, because it's a bit like that for me too. I guess I'm listening to so much metal outside of bands that I really enjoy, such as yourself. I've got to say, these days I listen to mainly classical and jazz music. And is it similar for you guys on the touring bus or in the van?
Yeah. The last couple tours, we've mostly listened to like 70s krautrock, like Popol Vuh and Harmonia, Noi, a lot of like calming ambient music, a lot of new age music, and then just revisiting classics that we all listened to in like middle school and high school, like Pink Floyd and King Crimson and stuff like that. Getting reigniting a love for that stuff after having listened to metal for like 5 years straight at least.
Yeah, it's a lot like that. It's certainly like that for me. I just find that I'm listening to so much metal with headphones on and doing reviews and getting ready for interviews, because I've got to say, I think I'm going to it sort of goes against the point that I just made before, but I think that from now on, I'm basically just going to focus on a lot of bands that have some vibe going on, or musicians or artists, because I've interviewed so many underground bands.
Awesome.
Well, I interviewed so many underground bands, man, where, like, if I started doing this back in, say, late 2016, some of those bands aren't even around sort of like a year or two later. And I spend...
Yeah, that's the other thing, is so much of it is a passing fad. Like, a lot of these bands will start out and they won't go on tour. Like, they'll play a couple of shows and be like, oh, it's not working out. Well, it's like, because you're not doing it. You actually have to go play shows. Like, getting a record it was always a really big deal to me, being pressed on vinyl. Nowadays, it seems like you put out a tape and the next 2 weeks you have the demo on an LP. It's good for them, but like, it was a really big deal to me.
Yeah, there's some insincerity around that too. I think I see with you guys, I've got a tape player and I love tapes, so I'd love to listen to you guys on cassette. Have you guys got a cassette version of Hidden History, or?
Yeah.
It's probably sold out though, I suppose.
There's a couple different pressings. There's like a European one and American one. I'm not quite sure. I didn't really follow. The European one was pressed in Germany, I believe, But I don't know. We're constantly repressing stuff, so I wouldn't say it's unattainable.
I'll look out for it. But I guess my point around that is I think there's been some insincerity with bands releasing things to make themselves look deliberately underground when they could just be releasing things on Bandcamp or MP3, and that'd probably be enough. And it sort of gives a false impression about what the bands are doing. And I've picked up some tapes that I haven't listened to beyond the first listen. So I don't even do that anymore, to be honest with you. If I haven't gotten familiar with a band through the MP3, I won't bother buying. Like the last two tapes I bought, to give you an idea, I mean, and I'm still listening to these two, is Mike Browning and Nocturnus AD's Paradox, which I think is a fantastic album. Jesus.
Hell yeah, that record rules. I'm yet to get all the way through it. I've heard like the first half a couple times, but I mean, he can do no wrong. That guy is so cool and so nice.
I got to say, he's one of my favourite interview subjects. I had a chat to him last week, and we spoke for almost 3 hours, a bit over 3 hours, and we're still communicating over Messenger with each other. He's just a bloody good bloke, Mike Browning, and I don't think people realise out there how important and how integral he is to the evolution of death metal.
Yeah, I mean, he was there when it started, early 80s, early Morbid Angel. Fucking Trey was obsessed with Nocturnus before Mike Browning was even in the band. You know, like when we toured with Immolation, Alex Books was telling us that way back when, I don't know, like 87 or 88, they were hanging out in some hotel room together after Morbid Angel had come up to play in New York for the first time. And Trey was just listening to this Nocturnus tape over and over again, trying to understand what the guitar was doing.
Mike Davis.
And so,
Yeah, exactly to your point there. I didn't realise that until I spoke to Mike Browning, that is, about it. And it was only, and this, God, I mean, I'm discovering new things all the time. It was only when I watched the video to Lake of Fire, or it might have been a rehearsal, actually. I found one on YouTube. There's a lot of things out there with Nocturnus rehearsing.
That sounds cool. Yeah, I should look into it.
Yeah, check it out. But I saw the way Mike Davis was, his left hand, being a right-handed guitarist, the way he was fingering the notes and the way he's phrasing the chords. And I was like, oh my God, I've seen that elsewhere. Where have I seen that? Trey. So I had no idea that Trey had been...
Influence.
Yeah, I didn't... I mean, who would know? And, of course, Mike Davis, like the other great guitarist who I wish would bloody do something, is Vito Bratta from White Line. They just disappear into the ether, and you think, my God, all this great music, it could have been made.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these weird tidbits, like these kind of information, it's like a torch being passed down, you know? Like when we toured with Immolation, we heard all sorts of crazy stories from the 80s about them going to Europe to record, and just being around all this when it was a new thing. It's compared to now, very different. Very different. Even though there is a new boom for it again, it's like the camaraderie, I don't feel it's like quite there.
Oh, is that right? Yeah, I exist in a bit of a bubble, you see, because literally nobody around me gets into metal except for me. I just love it. You know, I mean, you wouldn't even know looking at me I'm into metal. It's not really a thing for me from an aesthetic point of view. But to your point, like, yeah, I mean, I speak to people. I mean, I'm doing this so often that I feel connected to the artist. There's no doubt about that. But I was hoping that at this point in time there'd be more of a camaraderie or a brotherhood, because I've always found with musicians...
and that's not to say every band hates one another. You know, we have a great circle of friends and bands that we've toured with together many times, and will continue to do so forever. But just the general, like, world scheme of things, there's like so many different subgenres. You want to call it tech or prog or these types of bands won't tour with these types of bands, and also there's all these different types of scenes between overground and underground and promoters, everything we just spoke about, that it's like I don't know, it's a whirlwind.
Yeah, I just find
like
you go, sorry.
I think that the importance of it being a bit more cohesive is the healthy competition and inspiring one another.
Well, I think the operative word there is healthy, to your point. And what I find, and this is, I don't even play metal, I play covers, so jazz, funk, even this sort of stuff. And I even find in our local scene here in Brisbane, there are people that seem to get off on bringing other bands down, and it's for no reason. There's to no end. It just is an ego play, and it's something that.
That's a jockish thing.
Yeah, it's very strange, though, and I don't quite get it. I mean, especially from my perspective, I'm well into my 40s these days, and I just try to help people. Honestly, that's all that I try to do. I gave my old PA to my daughter's school. I just want people to create great music in the way that suits them and bring that music to people. But other people, I realise they're doing things from an ego standpoint, and I just think there's some people who've even stopped talking to because of that reason. I just think I can't do this anymore. It's way too hard, and I feel like as soon as I stop being of use to you as a musician, then I'll be thrown under the bus. So I'm going to end this relationship early, and I don't think it's just about musicians, but it just feels more prominent in music circles at times.
Well, especially in metal, because I don't know, it can get pretty bro-y and like really aggressive,
Yeah. Well, mate, as long as you guys are around to keep doing what you're doing, true fans of great heavy metal will have a band to look forward to releasing new music and also to keep on listening to the music that's out there. So, look, Morris, I've got to tell you, I really appreciate you taking the time out to do this. It's been fascinating having this conversation. You can tell I'm a big fan. I admire what you guys are doing, so please just keep on doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, this was a great conversation. I appreciate you asking me to do it.
So what I'll do, mate, from here, if you're comfortable with everything, I certainly am. I'll just release it as it is. I get so many people giving me such great feedback, and they love to tune into the conversation as the whole, unedited, away it goes. Yeah.
No need to chop it up.
Awesome.
It makes it all weird and not. Yeah, it doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah, I don't do it. I just put it all out there, and God, I'm far from perfect in terms of my interview technique and my conversational technique, but I just try to have a conversation with people, and I feel like as though I found an audience. I've got a bit of, there's a couple of hundred people all over the world that listen to me, but then of course there's fans of yours that I think are going to get a different perspective on what you're doing, and it'll add just another layer for them to get into.
I hope someone get some positive information out of this, and some questions were answered that they were looking for answers for.
Sweet, yeah. All right, well, thanks for the conversation, mate. I'll let you get back to your night, and look, appreciate everything, and hopefully, mate, when you tour Australia, mate, we can catch up.
Yeah, I'll if we get some dates figured out when all this settles down, I'll definitely stay in touch and let you know.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, mate. Yeah, awesome, mate. Yeah, well, thanks very much again. Really appreciate it, man.
Take care, Andrew.
No worries. You too, brother. Guys, catch ya.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to that one. Hope you got something out of it. There aren't too many conversations posted with Morris on the internets, so I hope that one did something for you. Now, if you enjoyed that chat, there are many more just like it over at scarsandguitars.com, and if you like listening, maybe you like reading, you're in luck, because I've written a book all about the podcast. Scars and Guitars Volume 1, Conversations from the World of Hard Rock, Heavy Metal and Beyond. Click on the link in the banner on the website. You'll be taken to a marketplace of your choice. Download a sample, and if you do complete the purchase because you like what you've read, do hit me up, because I want to thank you personally, and I've got some more information to share with you about the book in the moment. But before we get to that, I'll bid you a fond farewell. My name is Andrew Mackay-Smith, and I'm the host of the Scars and Guitars podcast. Until next time, it's a very goodbye for now.
This is Eric Rattan of Cannibal Corpse. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast with Andrew Mackay-Smith.
I've been the host of the Scars and Guitars podcast since 2017. The first musician I interviewed for the show was David Vincent from Morbid Angel, and things have just snowballed from there. In all, I've posted almost 650 podcast episodes featuring conversations with many of the leading lights of rock, heavy metal, and beyond. It just got to a point where I thought, I need to write a book about all this, so that's exactly what I did. In Scars and Guitars Volume 1, you'll read a heap of deep reveals and commentary, such as Des Fafara talking about Coal Chamber and why the band will never return.
If you're a band just starting out, you need to hear me. Do not start a band with partners. Ever.
Yeah, wise words there. Sage advice, mate, for anybody.
Don't ever, because I can't go do Coal Chamber right now unless I get others involved.
Phil Anselmo talks about the episode in his career which gives him the greatest sense of accomplishment.
I think the staying power of the fans and the staying power of the songs, you know, whether it's Pantera, Down, or Superjoint, the fans remember the songs.
Alex Skolnick from Testament confirms that, yes, playing the guitar in Ozzy's band is anything but an ordinary gig. Will Silent Oz from Dimmu Borgir write a book? Pa from Sabaton gives advice to people who want to start a band.
Look at the team around you, look at the bandmates. If the guys want to be on the stage, then it's all cool. If the guys want to be backstage, then it's not going to be cool.
Current and former members of Cradle of Filth discuss the band's seminal 90s material. Read about the reaction to George Lynch and Mark from Suicide Silence's comments when they throw shade at then President Donald Trump.
We have this idiotic monster, you know, this egotistical, self-aggrandizing, complete piece of shit in there. I just can't understand how we've gotten to this place.
And yeah, we kicked a hornet's nest with Sepultura. Percussive overlord Gene Hoglan talks about recording with Chuck Schuldiner.
Chuck was always, he was very open-minded, and he was into having his musicians that were playing with him just reach out for the best stuff that they had.
Phil Campbell from Motorhead discusses what it takes to get sober. John Five answers his critics who dismiss his tenure with Marilyn Manson.
You know, my name is John Five, and Manson gave me that name, and I had some of the best years of my life in that band and learned a lot.
And we get the lowdown on Treyarch Zagtoth from those who would know, including his mother. All across Scars and Guitars Volume 1, there are moments of tension, relief, tragedy, exhilaration, and throughout it all, you'll obtain insight that I believe no one else has managed to obtain from many of your favourite artists. So treat yourself. Scars and Guitars Volume 1 is currently available as an ebook with a print edition on the horizon. Follow the links attached and download a sample. I'm sure you'll be compelled to read the whole book.